I am the Hillbilly Hacker, and welcome to the Sandbox. No, not that sandbox. This is way inside the wire, deep into the green zone. So, today I'm going to show you the Sandbox setup that we're doing for our new segment called Hot Spam of the Week. You're going to love it, I promise. We'll pretty much blow this sandbox up a couple of times as we click spam links to see which ones are spams, scams, trackers, exploits, and of course, if we're lucky, good old ransomware. I expect to rebuild this whole system a lot. So I've started with the standard Comcast business line, completely separate from our production and test networks. Seriously, if it blows up, I can walk into the next room and pull the cord out of the wall if I have to. This connects to a Meraki MX firewall with limited remote capabilities to allow for some screen captures and general administration. I'll explain that in a bit. Now, if you don't understand a lot of the technology I'm talking about, that's okay. I'll try to keep it in as simple terms as possible. So far, all we've got is an internet connection and a firewall. Basic stuff, right? All right. I have an older server system. It's a Cisco C220. It's running a less than optimal version of VMware ESXi, and that is just a virtual machine system that I can build multiple servers in on one piece of hardware without having to have 4 different physical servers in the system. Also gives me the ability to do a lot of other cool things, which we'll talk about as we go along here. So now I've had these boxes for a while, and I basically use them these days just for staging, log collections, and general backup storage. This one is completely isolated. Now I do have separate network VLANs configured, virtual LANs. One virtual LAN is solely for the VMware and allows me to open the consoles directly on the server so we can see the desktops. And this is the VLAN that I have VPN access to. The actual data VLAN that all the traffic is going to go out to the hackers and whatnot is completely separate. I don't have it set to do any type of VPN, and I have it physically blocked at the firewall level from communicating back and forth to the other side. Now, that should keep us protected when the mushroom clouds hit on these boxes. Now, that's not entirely true. You wireheads out there but you're talking about VMware, you're talking about an older version of VMware. I know. Now, one little caveat. I already know this. There's a long, you look at me and you go, HH, there's a long list of vulnerabilities for VMware. You're right. I know exactly what you're saying. So, it is a real possibility that I can find myself in a situation where we click on something that targets directly VMware and takes over my VMware server at the base level to the point where I have to rebuild the entire box, including the integrated lights out system that runs even if the computer is turned off. But it's okay. This is for science. If I have to blow it up, I have a couple more sitting in the bag. It'll probably take me just a few days to rebuild it all, but for science. Now, let's talk about the actual sandbox environment. I've created a mock enterprise environment. You'll see this set up in businesses for 5 people or 50,000 people. Maybe not to this scale. I mean, more than 4 servers, obviously. We have a single Windows domain controller running Windows Server 2022, and I have it set up with all the latest updates, but it runs as a domain controller. It controls the access. So the user list is stored on the domain controller and acts as the permission giver when you log into the system. It stores the passwords, it keeps a list of all the user accounts, and decides which files you have permissions to talk to inside the domain. If you want me to talk about domains, I can talk about domains all day, but ask me, I'll do a video on it. This also includes a DNS server, domain name service, which is used to find web pages by their name and not their IP address. And because the Windows domain requires it. I also have installed, at least you'll notice in the picture here on the left side, you've got Bitdefender sitting on the domain controller, but I also have it on the PC01, and I'll talk about PC01 in a second. Bitdefender is running as my endpoint protection, old school antivirus if you want to think of it that way. I have Wireshark for network packet capture and this handy little tool called RegShot that allows me to take a snapshot of the registry in Windows and the file system to see what files and registry changes have been made by whatever we click. Now, after we compromise our system, we then run a second snapshot and we can compare the changes that were made. So the primary workstation is Sandbox PC01. It's a domain-joined Windows 10 virtual machine with all the latest updates. Yeah, I know, Windows 10 is end of life, it's end of support, and you can only get a certain subset of updates. However, I have seen very few Windows 11 computers running in a lot of offices, so I want to show just how dangerous that is. Also on this computer, I've installed Bitdefender, Wireshark, and Redshot to give us the same capabilities. I've included a couple of other systems just because. One is a standalone Windows server, Windows Server 2022. It's hosting a web server and a shared directory using SMB, shared directories. Again, we'll get into that. The shared directory has a single file called salary something, but it's a honeypot. I am auditing this file through Windows to see how it's accessed or if it's ever accessed. The other is a Windows 10 standalone PC. For these two standalone devices, I'm only using Microsoft Defender as the endpoint protection antivirus, and we'll see how that runs. I'm also running Wireshark, Redshot, so we can see how the distribution of the malicious files and malware or ransomware goes across the network internally, because all these computers can speak to each other. They're all in the same IP range. Now on all the machines, I have enabled the app and browser control. Now that's in the Windows security settings, and which is not on by default. I've also left the native Windows firewall in place, even on the Bitdefender systems, because as you may or may not know, all the endpoint protection software provides additional protections beyond just Windows Firewall, but also will use Windows Firewall in a lot of cases for basic network blocking. So I've left that on. Let's see, what else? For the user accounts, I gave the local computer admin the same password as the Active Directory or domain controller admin password. Why? Well, sadly, this is how most small businesses run, and I expect we'll find some very nasty exploitation because of it. Now, I also have a separate local user on the two standalone VMs. Again, we'll see how they're attacked when we go back and look at the changes that are made in our log files. So for our test, I will be using the domain user on Sandbox PC01 to click on all the links and to initiate all the tests. Now, technically speaking, as a user, I should be limited by Windows what I can do and what I can't do. You're going to find that's not always true. Now, we will also do the same thing, especially if we can't get it to run, as the user, we'll run it as the administrator on that box to see how it responds, because we'll definitely get more response out of the administrator because they have more rights on the machines. So let's see, what else? I'll have some packet captures and logs to go through. That's what Wireshark is for. But we're also going to do the exact same thing and pull those from the firewall once we start getting some malicious traffic rolling, so that we can kind of see how the data spikes. You can get an idea for how that traffic looks. So if you're running a monitoring program and you go, oh, that's interesting, I'm getting a spike every 30 seconds. That's very typical of malware, where you get that spike every 30 seconds or every minute or every 2 minutes, or even sometimes they get weird and it's like every 36 seconds. But we'll hopefully get to see a lot of that in the logs. Now, I can already hear you say, this isn't exactly standard. You're right. I hope to add Windows 11 computers soon. I just currently don't have anything not in production or in staging or working for a customer that I can use. And I can't take away from the business to do that. And we'll get to it, I promise. I'm also going to have a Mac that I'm going to be adding into the system. I didn't have it ready just yet. I want to make sure it's as secure as possible and standalone to the point where I can rebuild it as necessary. That's the hard part, because it is a physical machine. I'm also going to look to add a Linux installation later, running a database of some sort, maybe a web page. Like you would typically find in most Linux installations in an enterprise. But this should get us started. So if you have any questions or recommendations, reach out to me. We can modify the Sandbox. That's what it's about. If you have recommendations or if you want to know more about how the Sandbox works in a more technical way, let me know. I may do a video a little more in-depth if you have specific questions. I'll compile them and put them into something. So I also do expect to do a little malware dissection, maybe using Gerda or some other application dissection tool, but I am not a programmer. In fact, I am terrible at it. So if nothing else, we'll send it up to VirusTotal and let VirusTotal see it, at least get the signatures out there so that the larger companies can pick up on it and add it into their definitions. So if it's not being seen in the wild, we may be the first ones to put it out there. I doubt it. These are spam links. They're getting out to a lot of people, and a lot of people are clicking on it. So until we do this for live, have a great day.